Today, let's recap the 2024 Wildcard Round on this edition of the Shumake Take. Let's get it. All right, and welcome in, everybody. Hope you're having a fantastic, fantabulous, awesome freaking day. My name is Garrett Shumake, and you are listening to the Shumake Take. This is episode number 37, and today we're going to be recapping the Wildcard Round. Sorry that this video is out a little bit later than normal. Man, keeping a schedule is hard. Keeping a schedule is really hard because you got work, you got other responsibilities, and sometimes you're just plain out tired and you don't feel like recording. And the thing is, like, in order for this channel to grow, I'm going to have to be better at keeping a content schedule and keeping it consistent. But, man, there's some times where it's really, really tough. Like, last night, I had got home from work. I had went for my walk. I was chilling. And, honestly, I lay down on my bed for just a little bit to relax. And then I ended up taking a nap. And I was like, man, I just do not feel like recording today. I was just so tired. And it's tough. It's really, really tough trying to keep a consistent schedule. But enough about that. There's really not much there. But before we get into this recap of the Wildcard Round, which was pretty fantastic, if I do say so myself, in my opinion, there are some corrections I have to make from my last video. The first one, Tom Telesco, I said that he wasn't a good GM. No, this dude's a really good GM. That was me just straight up not knowing ball. I looked into it afterward, and yeah, he's literally the reason why almost every star player on the LA Chargers is on the Chargers right now. Justin Herbert, he drafted Joey Bosa, Rashawn Slater, right? He drafted Keenan Allen and a couple other guys in there, Mike Williams, right? So, I mean, a lot of the cornerstones of that team, he drafted those guys. So that is my bad. And also, obviously, in this draft, in this past draft, he drafted Brock Bowers. He drafted Jackson Powers Johnson, the center out of Oregon, who was pretty good for them. And then he also drafted Dre Tucker late, who did some good things. So that counts for something. But yeah, that was just me not knowing ball. And then also, when I was talking about the Chargers, Texans, and the Rams and the Vikings, I said the winner of those games specifically would go on to face the number one seed. That's not how that works. It's the lowest seed goes to the number one seed. I knew how that works. I just wasn't paying attention. So that's another thing I wanted to fix. That's my bad. So this time around, we're going to be a little bit more cleaner and also a little bit more news in the NFL and college football landscape. First one, I want to give a little bit more of my thoughts on Carson Beck going to Miami. It's weird because I thought he'd declare for the draft, but you know what? It makes sense because got hurt in the SEC championship against Texas, and then obviously this year really was not his best year. It was pretty bad compared to his other ones, and in my opinion, his draft stock would have went from top 10 pick going into the 2024 season, from now down to, I would say, third round pick if he had declared for the draft. So he's going to transfer to Miami. He's going to go to the ACC school, or to one of the best ACC schools, and he's going to look good, and he's going to end up boosting his draft stock, I think. So good for him. I mean, I get it. I mean, do it with your best, do what you think is best for your career. I respect it. And also, Quinn Ewers, he is going to declare for the NFL draft. A lot of people speculated that he was going to stay and transfer. He had offers allegedly from Alabama, Ole Miss, and to go back to Ohio State, and was offered like $6 million in NIL. So it was very enticing, but he ultimately declares for the NFL draft. I think Quinn Ewers now would be a late second round pick, in my opinion. That's pretty fair because he's got the arm talent, can make all the throws, but under pressure, crumbles, and also not the most mobile guy. I mean, yeah, he can run around a little bit, but not as much as I would like him to. The big thing was he just had a lot of bad throws, a lot of inaccurate throws, and with the time of him going out of the game and Arch Manning coming in, it's not a good look. I mean, I don't know the exact context behind all of them. I know sometimes he just got benched because they were getting blown out, like in the Georgia game, the first go-around, obviously. And then, of course, he got hurt early in the year, so Arch Manning played a couple of games. So to be fair, like I said, I'm not 100% sure on all the times he was out of the game and Arch was put in front of him. But at the same time, his play on the field definitely was worse this year than it was last year. So it went from a first-round pick to a second-round pick, in my opinion, but a guy that you could probably draft and sit for a couple years, let him develop, and see if he turns into something. He does have playing potential. So either way, Quinn Ewers going into the draft. Congratulations for you, young man. Hoping that you will get drafted to a good team and have a successful NFL career, but we'll talk about that later. Getting into the NFL news really quick, Mike Vrabel is now the head coach of the New England Patriots, the move that everyone's been wanting to make or wanting to see since Tennessee fired him in 2023 at the end of that season. And so now he's finally there. And as predictable as the move is, I'd probably give the move, I'd say a B. I'd probably give it a B just because like that's the predictable move, and it's a good move because you get a good head coach that's going to get more out of your players, which is all fine and dandy, although I really would have liked New England to do something different and go out and get an offensive head coach to help your young quarterback, Drake May. And Mike Vrabel doesn't exactly have a history of being able to successfully develop quarterbacks. I mean, sure, he got a lot out of Ryan Tannehill, but he's a veteran, right? But he couldn't get the most out of Marcus Mariota when he was in Tennessee. So that's unfortunate. So it makes you wonder, what's he going to do with Drake May? Because I know everyone's hyped about Mike Vrabel going to New England because he is a good coach, and yes, he's going to get more wins. He's going to get more out of this roster. But in Tennessee, he didn't prove that he could build a roster that was aging and was no longer competitive. And also, I mean, the lack of history of developing quarterbacks here, I think you really needed to go an offensive head coach to develop Drake May. And that's my big question mark is how is he going to be able to do that? I mean, I'm not saying he can't, but I don't have a lot of, I shouldn't say not confidence, but I don't have faith that he's going to be able to do that. Obviously, an offensive coordinator is going to come in here and he's going to, be the main guy, whatnot, and the quarterback coach, right? All that stuff, that's what's going to happen. But at the same time, as a head coach, you got to be able to coach everybody and elevate everybody. But at the same time, it's just an interesting situation. It's a very predictable situation. Obviously, everyone's been penciling this in since he was fired from Tennessee. But I'm just not so sure. Like, it'll increase their short-term success. Their long-term success, I'm very skeptical of. And also, Mike McCarthy, the head coach, now former head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, is out. They could not negotiate a deal on the Tuesday. This past Tuesday. Today is now Wednesday. You guys are probably seeing this Thursday. But he is out as the Cowboys head coach, and apparently there is now rumors that Deion Sanders, the head coach of Colorado and the former Dallas Cowboys legend, will be going back home to be the head coach for the Dallas Cowboys. That is not happening, in my opinion, guys. Sorry, I don't buy that. He likes Colorado. He talks about how much he likes Colorado and building that program, and he's also talked about why he would almost never coach for an NFL team. So I just don't see that happening. It did say, okay, if I can coach my sons, his sons, Shedeur Sanders, and also Shiloh Sanders, he would coach in the NFL. Well, first things first, the Cowboys, they're picking like 11th or 12th in the draft. I mean, they're not trading up to number 1 with Tennessee to go get Shedeur Sanders. Like the amount of capital you would have to give up to go that high would be just too much, and it would set this franchise back because they literally wouldn't be able to get that guy. And also, Jerry Jones is not an aggressive owner. He doesn't make moves. Last offseason, he didn't make any moves other than bringing back Zeke, right? So why would I expect Jerry Jones to go from below a top 10 pick to trade up all the way to number 1? I don't buy it. I simply don't buy it. But it will be interesting. My back just spasmed. What the heck was... Ow! My back just randomly started spasming. I have no idea why that happened, but it was hitting like right here, like on like the middle area right there, like on the side, kind of like where your rib cage is, kind of like, those are my ribs, right? Yeah, I can feel the ribs. Yeah, around my rib cage, but it was on my backside, so that hurt. That was interesting, but anyways, continuing our conversation or concluding the conversation here, Deion Sanders is not becoming the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, but it will be interesting to see like who will be, because now with him not negotiating a deal, they're behind the 8 ball compared to every other team that needs a head coach. And, the top candidates, like Ben Johnson, for example, are still in the playoffs, and you can't interview them, while he already has interviews lined up with other teams for when the Lions are out of the playoffs, whenever that happens. So, Cowboys are behind the 8 ball, which doesn't surprise me with them being behind there and waiting to the last minute. That's what they did with Dax, what they did with CeeDee Lamb and their contracts before going into the year, and it wouldn't surprise me if they did that with Micah Parsons. So, it'll be interesting to follow, interesting story, but we got to get into this wildcard round, because it was very interesting. Fantastic may have been too easy of a word, because outside of the Commanders and Bucks game, none of these games were particularly great. While some games were fun to watch, or fun to watch a certain team, like Baltimore beating Pittsburgh or LA beating the Vikings. Man, that was a crazy one in my opinion. I was not expecting that. We'll get to that at the end of the show. But it's interesting to see, like, you know, some of these teams and, like, looking at how they play in the playoffs and, like, really looking at the game plan. Because I had a game plan for every team for 3 keys to win going into our last episode when I was previewing all these wildcard games. And so to be able to watch the game and see what these teams, you know, did right, you know, did they follow the game plan one? Most of the time they did. And the teams that didn't do their keys to win the game didn't win the game. So following those storylines that I created was pretty interesting. It was pretty cool that I was able to kind of get most of those right analytically, because I was like, you know, thinking about it, planning it out. I was like, okay, this has to happen. This has to happen. And so to see it actually happen or see it not happen, I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool that I was able to do that. So either way, let's start with the first game of the wildcard round. The Chargers defeating the Texans. Wait a minute. I read that backwards. Don't mind me. I'm not dyslexic, but I just straight up read that backwards. The Texans defeated the Chargers 32-12. The Texans get a shocking win here. And for the Chargers, it is time to start having a very difficult conversation. First off, we're going to start with Houston. I want to shout out. Oh my God, what am I doing here? I want to shout out to the Texans and their resiliency, because that is really what defined this game for them. Because first play of the game, CJ Stroud throws a pass to John Mechie, fumbles the football, ripped out by Alohi Gilman. Derwin James recovers the football. And then at the beginning of the second quarter, Deion Leonard picks off CJ Stroud. It looked like he tried to throw it away, but underthrew it. I don't know what was going on there. And then in the third quarter, Joe Mixon fumbled, and Tony Jefferson, who was a scout, I think, or working in the front office of the Chargers, came back to play and then got a forced fumble, which was pretty cool, by the way. And then they also had 8 penalties for 86 yards, which killed them multiple times on drives. Multiple times. But despite all of that, despite all the fact that throughout the first quarter and the, you know, near the end of the second half, they had nothing on offense. They literally had nothing going. It looked awful. And CJ Stroud takes a snap, fumbles the ball, picks it up and starts rolling to his right. And I'm like, okay, this is about to be a throwaway, you know, busted play, whatever. And he throws it. It's in the middle of the field. Like, it's in play. And I'm like, what? And the next thing I know, there's Xavier Hutchinson. Boom! He caught the pass. And I'm like, what? He got that? That's crazy. And then guess what happened? They went on to get a touchdown on that drive, which capped off a 99-yard drive. For perspective, the last 5 possessions, they only had 76 yards. They topped that in one drive. Congratulations. That's awesome. That's really awesome. And then on the next drive, they get a stop on third down, and then a 27-yard run by CJ Stroud gets them 3 more points right before half. And then in the second half, you got another field goal drive. There was an interception that was overturned, and then there was an unsportsmanlike penalty that put them at one point after a holding penalty. And at one point after that sequence of plays, they were at a 2nd and 40 out of field goal range, and they were able to get back into field goal range and get some points and salvage the drive. And the second big takeaway for Houston, was this defense. They kept fighting. They played fantastic. Everything I said they needed to do, they did it and then some. This is what they did. This Houston Texans defense eliminated the run game, held the Chargers to 50 rushing yards. Only 50 rushing yards the entire game, which is already awesome. But they didn't allow a first down until the middle of the second quarter. They were 3 for 11 on third down, got a 4th down stop early or late in the game. They got 4 sacks and got pressure all day long, which is one of the keys they needed to win this game, was for this Texans defense to get in the backfield and stop the run game and get after Herbert. And what was really special was the secondary. Ladd McConkey had a fantastic day for the Chargers. We'll talk about him later. But other than that, you know, one guy had 2 catch, and 3 of them had 1 catches, and that was it. And of course, they had 4 interceptions. One of them was a pick 6 by Eric Murray. What an absolute performance that this defense had. Especially, like, really from this secondary. Because the secondary was the issue on this defense all year long. And quite frankly, I think they were the best part. They may have been the best part of this entire game for Houston. Which is awesome. That is absolutely awesome. Eric Murray got the pick six that I just mentioned a second ago. Kamari Lassiter, the rookie corner out of Georgia, he got a pick. And then Derek Stingley got two. He got one in the middle of the second quarter or third quarter, and then he got one that ended the game. It was kind of a desperation throw, but I mean, that's fantastic stuff right here. Absolutely fantastic stuff. I mean, you can't ask for a better performance. You literally cannot ask for a better performance. When Ladd McConkey had the day that he had for LA, but literally no one else did nothing, that says a lot of something. That says a lot about how resilient this team is and how much they really wanted this. And it goes to show that, look, you may not, I called the Houston Texans a mid-football team, and hey, they might still be a mid-football team, but you know what? They came out with a game plan, and they went out and they went and earned it. And that's something people say all the time. When you get into the playoffs, it doesn't matter if you're the first seed or the seventh seed. If you're in, you have a shot. And they went and they just played like they had nothing left to lose. They went all out, and they got a huge win at home. And now CJ Stroud has 2 playoff wins in his young career, which is more than a lot of big-time quarterbacks in the NFL now, which is, hey, if you're a Houston Texans fan, what a way for this season to continue going. After what had happened in the regular season, to step up in the postseason like that is just fantastic, and it really reinvigorates your passion for football, because losing a bunch of games at the end of the year and having momentum sucks. Even when you're going into the playoffs, it feels like you're just going to lose. It felt like the Texans were just going to lose out, or not lose out like the regular season, but like go into the playoffs, get stomped by the Chargers, and go out, and it's like, oh, hey, we made the playoffs 2 years ago. It was, and it kind of would have been a little bit gloomy. But now, even if you lose to Kansas City next week, hey, you know what? You got that win against the Chargers. It was a dominant win, and it showed that, guess what? Houston's still moving in the right direction. That's what really matters. But getting to the offensive side of things, enough talking about this defense and the resiliency of this team. CJ Stroud ended up finishing with 282 yards, had a touchdown, did have the interception like I mentioned before. Again, I don't know what was happening there. It looked like he was trying to throw it away, but just kind of floated it a little bit too far, and then it was able to get picked off last second. And then Nico Collins, he had 7 catches, 122 yards, and had the touchdown right before halftime, capping off that 99-yard drive, which was awesome. And 8 players caught a pass for Houston, which most of them went for first downs. This is one of the other keys to the game that I said Houston needed to do in order to win. It was to help CJ Stroud and distribute the ball. Distribute the ball and help him out. And along with helping him out, get easy short throws and use rollouts. They started doing that more in the second half and getting in space, and it worked. And when it came to containing the pass rush, the offensive line honestly held their own pretty well. They held their own pretty well. They allowed like 1 or 2 sacks the whole game, and they were able to scheme up quick passes, get the ball out on time, and it was perfect. I wouldn't say it was perfect, but it was pretty darn good. Like, what the Texans needed to do to win this game, they did it. They did it and then a little bit more, which is awesome. That's fantastic. Joe Mixon, 25 carries, 106 yards, and a touchdown. That long touchdown run was the one that iced the game and put them up over the top and gave them the 31, then eventually 32 points, which, there you go. They ran the ball well, and that's really what made the difference here. They just had a great game plan, and they wanted it more. They simply came in with the juice, like I said, and they earned it. They came out here, and they earned it. And, again, once you're in, you have a shot. They rose to the occasion. Now you go to Kansas City next week. You got a very tall task. But if Houston comes in that game with some juice, they're going to make that game competitive, and it could be a fun game to watch. And then moving on to the Chargers side of things, this is where things get a little bit more negative. Justin Herbert, 14 of 32, less than 50%, 242 yards, 1 touchdown pass, the 4 interceptions. In the second quarter, his first one was rolling to his right, threw it to the left side of the field in a double coverage. Kamari Lassiter picks it up. Awful throw. Incredibly awful throw and horrible decision. I don't know why your thought is to roll here and go all the way over there. Literally made 0 sense to me. You'd rather just throw it away right there if nothing was open right in front of you and just move on to the next down. Like, I don't get why we're trying to throw these 50-yard arcing bombs from one side of the field to the other, which allows a bunch of defenders to be able to rally and catch up to the ball. Like, I don't get why we're still doing that. And then The second interception, that one wasn't his fault. It was a throw to Will Dissly. He had it in his hands and it popped out, and it was picked off by Derek Stingley. And then the third pick was to... Was that the Eric Murray? Yeah, the third pick was the Eric Murray pick 6. Threw it way too high over Kamari Lassiter. And I heard some people saying, oh, Ladd McConkey should have caught that. It went through his hands. Well, at the same time, he shouldn't have to reach to the moon to try and catch a pass from Justin Herbert when he could have just threw it right here in his chest and it would have been a solid catch and a first down. Like, sorry, that was a bad throw from Justin Herbert. And the fourth one, he just threw it up, desperation. And the big thing here is the 4 interceptions in this game were more than he threw all regular season. He only threw 3 in the entire regular season and beat that in this one game alone. That's bad. That's really, really bad. But it's not like he was alone. He got no help in the running game. J.K. Dobbins had 9 carries. 9 carries. Gus Edwards, 7 carries. Add on like a carry. I can't remember. There was like another carry from, I guess it was Justin Herbert. I can't remember the stat. But in total, they had 18 carries. 18 carries all game for an offense that is run-based, that literally functions at its best based off of running the football? You gotta be kidding me. You gotta be kidding me. This is not what you're supposed to do. This is not who you are. And something like that, this will be a common trend when I talk about the teams that lose, because the majority of the teams that lost have not been in the playoffs for at least 2+ years. And the Chargers being one of them, the inexperience that this team has in the postseason kind of showed, because the teams that are the best, as we'll continue to talk about with this side of it too, they embrace who they are and they know who they are. The Chargers are a running-based football team. And so when you go in with a game plan and only run the ball 18 times, that's not going to cut it. That's simply not going to cut it. And I get it. They were stuffed in the backfield. They were stuffed in the line of scrimmage. They really couldn't get the run game going. But at some point, you got to try something, and they simply didn't adapt enough. And when they were trying to chuck it down the field, the only person that got open and did anything was Ladd McConkey, who had 9 catches, 197 yards, had a big 86-yard touchdown in the fourth quarter, and it was early in the fourth quarter, too, and it made it a 2-score game, which for a moment it was interesting, but it was too little too late. And it's hard to really credit the touchdown to Justin Herbert. Obviously, he threw it. But, I mean, Ladd McConkey made a big catch and was able to catch and run it all the way. I mean, it's not like it was a big bomb or anything. He threw it, and then Ladd McConkey ran it all the way in. So it's like, is that touchdown really, like, more of Herbert, or is it more of McConkey? And it was more of Ladd McConkey, who had a historic day, quite frankly. But it was wasted. It was wasted because no one else said anything on offense. Quentin Johnson, he had 5 targets and 0 catches. All these catches, 3 or 4 out of 5 were straight up drops. One of them was broken up. It was a tight throw, and he couldn't catch it in traffic. And overall, they really didn't get guys in space. They really did not get guys in space consistently, which one of the keys was for them to get guys in space to help stretch this defense. And they did not do it. They weren't doing enough schematic stuff. They were making it as hard as they could on themselves to move the ball down the field. They simply couldn't do it. And this defense, while it was good in the first half, they tried their best to help Justin Herbert. I mean, that was the third key, to help Justin Herbert and help this offense. But the offense literally couldn't get along this whole game long. All game long, they literally couldn't. And eventually, the defense is going to break down. If you cannot sustain drives by running the football, your defense will be on the field more, and they will get tired, and they will allow more plays. That is what happens. That is why being able to run the ball and being able to get guys in space and sustain drives is so important. And they weren't able to do it. So, honestly, to conclude this, the loss is 100% on the coaching staff. The Chargers know who they are. I mean, they're a running-based football team, and they simply just didn't do enough of that. They simply did not cater to what their players do best, and they did not adapt. They didn't adapt to what Houston was doing, and it cost them a playoff win. And then, while I said the loss is on the coaching staff, the other big piece of blame pie goes to Justin Herbert. 4 interceptions in this game. He was bad. He was really, really bad. He had missed throws. All the interceptions were pretty darn bad, except for the desperation one. I mean, whatever. Sure, he threw it, but, I mean, at that point, the game was over. You're just trying to go for a big play, so it is what it is. But 2 out of the 4 interceptions were blatantly terrible. And at this point, I'm sorry. Justin Herbert, I don't want to hear Justin Herbert being in the top 5 conversation anymore. I don't want to hear it. I simply don't want to hear it. Because you can say in the regular season and as a talent, sure, you can make that argument. And I'm willing to listen to it. But eventually, when it comes to an argument of who is the best quarterback in the NFL, part of that argument is how well you do in the playoffs. Because that's where it really matters. And it's hard to, I don't want to discredit what Justin Herbert does in the regular season, because obviously in the regular season and as a talent, like I said, he's arguably top 5. That debate is legitimate. There's no discrediting that. But eventually, the holistic debate, the playoffs come into mind. And the 2 times Justin Herbert's been in the playoffs, he threw 4 interceptions in this game, and the other one against Jacksonville, he blew a 27-point lead. Now, was that all his fault? Obviously not. I mean, it doesn't take one guy, doesn't single-handedly blow a 27-point lead. The whole team does that. But at the same time, you're the quarterback, and last I checked from watching that game a couple years ago, that second half really was not that good from Justin Herbert. It really was not that good. So, yeah, these 2 playoff losses for Herbert are not good, and I don't want to hear Justin Herbert being a top 5 QB anymore. Until he can do something, like get a wild card win or something, and prove that he can do something in the playoffs, I don't want to hear it, because this part of the debate will always come in and will always push it down. Unfortunately, that's how it works. Sorry, not sorry. Justin Herbert's a great quarterback, but when it comes to the playoffs, he is not it right now. We'll move on to the Ravens defeating the Steelers, quite frankly, beating the ever-living daylights out of them. 28-14, Ravens winning in what could be a defining moment in their playoff run. And for Pittsburgh, they have a defining moment for all the wrong reasons. Baltimore straight up dominated this game. No other way to put it. They had a plan to run the ball a ton and dominate time of possession. You could tell that was the plan, and they did it. They held the ball for 39.5 minutes. That is 2/3 of the game. Pittsburgh, for perspective, in the first half, they only touched the ball like 3 or 4 times, only had 60 yards of offense, and didn't have the ball for 10 minutes. In the first half, they only had it for less than 10 minutes. Are you kidding me? That is ridiculous. And you want to go to the other side of the argument of teams that win in the playoffs know who they are? Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens know who they are. They embrace it. They literally just dove headfirst into it. They ran the ball 13 straight times to start this game. Along with that, the first 5 runs were runs by Lamar Jackson. They went all in on this game plan. And honestly, looking at what they did, I don't think the Zay Flowers injury changed all that much. I think that you could tell this was their plan from the get-go. You could tell this was what they were going to do regardless. Obviously, the passing game would have been a little bit more involved had Zay Flowers went in my opinion. But this was the game plan from the get-go. And on that first drive, Derrick Henry had a 33-yard run where he stiff-armed Minka Fitzpatrick. And when that happened, you could feel this game was over. This game felt over the moment that stiff arm happened, in my opinion, because they were getting this defensive line and defensive overall was getting manhandled. They were getting destroyed. They were straight up getting destroyed. And then in the second half, things got a little. Back up just a little bit. After that, touchdown drive. Derrick Henry had a 33-yard run. Lamar throws it to Rashad Bateman for a touchdown, and then right before the 2-minute drill, the Baltimore Ravens just start throwing down the field. They literally just started diming and immediately working their way up the field. And then right before halftime, Lamar Jackson dances around, buys time, and throws the touchdown to Justice Hill. And you want to see why he's the greatest dual threat quarterback of our generation, probably of all time? No. He's the greatest dual threat quarterback of all time. Plays like that are why. Plays like that touchdown to Justice Hill are why. He was literally running around doing whatever he wanted to do. It did not matter. No Steeler, even when they got close, couldn't touch him. I don't think he was even touched that entire time. Maybe he had a hand on a shoulder pad, but that was it. Literally no one was touching Lamar Jackson, and he was able to get a touchdown right before halftime. Fan-flippin-tastic. And then we'll move on to the second half. Russell Wilson is able to finally get a deep shot over the middle to Calvin Austin. And later on in that drive, they get a beautiful throw to Van Jefferson, get the game's first touchdown for Pittsburgh, which capped it off to a 98-yard drive. And then this team was net back in it. And the next offensive drive, they got the touchdown to George Pickens. And it kind of felt like the Steelers kind of woke up a little bit. And this game might get a little bit competitive. But the thing was, in the middle of these two touchdown drives, Derrick Henry made one of the plays of the game. He had his 44-yard touchdown where he outran the whole defense. And the reason why this worked, because they ran a read option, but they held it for about 3 or 4 yards. Like, they literally stalled this thing out as long as they can. And what ended up happening was, because Lamar Jackson was holding that ball, this entire defense was moving right, as they were moving right here. And Lamar, if we took the ball, he was going to, bounce outside. The Steelers defense were kind of running right here and kind of getting ready to, counter it. And the next thing you know, this middle of the field was wide open. And I'm going to put a picture on the screen right now. Look at this. Look at this. Derrick Henry is bigger than every last one of those players trying to chase him right now, and he outran all of them. With some of those guys being ahead of him. They were like 3 or 4 yards ahead of him before he completely blew past them. That right there is the power. That is the power of Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, 2 Hall of Fame players in the backfield. That's the power. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, there's a reason why when Derrick Henry went to Baltimore, people were hyping this up as one of the greatest backfields we've ever seen. Because stuff like that. When can you ever hold a read option for multiple yards down the field and be able to just, with 2 players as dynamic as they are, create a gap that wide open? Like, what? What? That is insane. My chair is squeaking a lot. But that's just crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And then in the fourth quarter, finally, they get a couple sacks on Wilson, slow down the offense a little bit more. He tried throwing a prayer on 4th down with like 9 minutes to go. It nearly got picked in the end zone. But ultimately, it sealed the game. And the big takeaway here for Baltimore was they finished with the single game franchise record 299 yards, while the Steelers finished with 29. Oh dear. Oh no. That's not I mean, 299 rushing yards to 29. Oh god, like they really, if you guys didn't watch this game, I don't want to say you missed nothing, but the Ravens quite literally destroyed them. Outside of a couple drives, Pittsburgh really didn't look like they were in it. For this entire first half, they were barely giving any effort. But we'll talk more about that here at the end with Pittsburgh. I don't want to get too lopsided here. Going back to Baltimore, and we can finish off Baltimore real quick. Lamar Jackson finishes 16-21, 175 yards, 2 touchdowns, add on 15 carries for 81 yards. Already, I can't say more enough about a fantastic performance that he had against a divisional rival in the playoffs. That's the type of performance you want to have. And then Isaiah Likely was the team leader in yards. He had 3 catches for 53. Andrews was 2 for 27. Nelson Aguilar had a 25-yard catch in the second half, which was nice. But overall, 7 players caught a pass. And you look at the yards per catch numbers, 17.7, 13.5, 12, 25 for Aguilar. Tylan Wallace had a 21-yard catch where he converted a 3rd and long, which is pretty cool because he fought for it. And that was fun. That was really cool, right? And then the running game that stole the show, Derrick Henry, 26 carries, 186 yards, 2 touchdowns for El Tractorcito. Absolutely fantastic. And between Lamar and Derrick Henry, they ran the ball 41 times. In total, as a team, they ran the ball exactly 50 times. If you run the ball 50 times with that type of success, you're going to win a football game. You're simply going to win one. I mean, there's literally no way that you don't. That is just offensive dominance in a way that running the football I have not seen personally in a very long time. Like, that was different. Like, we've seen, obviously, good running teams and dominant time of possession, all that stuff. But no, that was different. Ran the ball 50 times and dominated time of possession. They held the ball for 2/3 of the game. That's nuts. That is absolutely insane. And defensively, played fantastic. 4 sacks, 5-11 on third down, got the fourth down stop, nearly got the interception. They held Pittsburgh to 280 total yards and 29 rushing yards. They did what they needed to do to win. Obviously, the keys were to run the ball well, stop the run, and minimize the flags, which they had 3 for 14, which is much better than Pittsburgh. And this team really feels like they could be the Ravens team. Not only did I mention, they fully embrace who they are, but if you watch this game, you could feel it. You could legitimately feel how bad they want to win and go all the way. They want it so freaking bad. It was just a matter of will. They literally felt like willpower, sheer willpower of wanting to dominate their opponents and go win. It was at a point, too, where they were up big and, the Ravens fans were chanting MVP for Lamar Jackson, and then he had to break the huddle and then start, angrily getting people to calm down and quiet down because they couldn't hear the call coming in. And it's like they're that locked in. Like, they are so focused and locked in, it's not even funny. They want it so bad, and that game showed, how much they really wanted it. You could feel it. You could legitimately feel how much they wanted this win. Going into Pittsburgh, I have one question for you. One question. What was this game plan? What was this game plan for Pittsburgh? I'm even thinking about it right now and reminiscing on it. I'm so mind-boggled as to why Arthur Smith woke up and as he was planning for this game, he decided that he wasn't going to run the ball. Before we get into running the ball, let's start with this passing game really quick. Russell Wilson, he was 20 of 29, 270 yards, 2 touchdowns. The stat line looks good, but honestly, 5 out of 6 were real shots down the field. A lot of it was short to intermediate. And honestly, he didn't do enough. He didn't do enough. The big plays downfield simply there was not enough of those. Like I said, 5 to 6 of those were real shots down the field. And George Pickens had 87 yards and a touchdown, but outside of 2 big catches, the 3 catches were kind of small, and other than that, he was literally completely quiet. He felt like a non-factor if he wasn't getting the ball, and that's weird to say, but in a way, it kind of makes sense. Sometimes, obviously, you're not going to be open every play and whatnot, but this dude made a big play, and then another big play, and then other than that, he was just nothing. He wasn't getting open consistently. He wasn't obviously getting the ball consistently enough for what they needed to do to win. And, Najee Harris finished with 41 yards and then took a screen pass for a decent distance. Mike Williams and Calvin Austin both had a big catch in this game that went over 20 yards. And Pat Freiermuth had 3 catches for 15 yards. They simply didn't use it enough. 8 different players got a pass. One of the keys to victory for Pittsburgh was to throw everything at them. Throw the kitchen sink, get everybody involved in the pass game. And, in a way they kind of did that, but they didn't do enough. But going back to the run game, this is their first key, to run the ball well. And on the stat sheet, there was 11 runs, but 3 of them were by Russell Wilson. So realistically, there were 8 of them that were designed. 8? 8 runs. 8? And I thought the Chargers was bad. This is straight up despicable. And I would go as far as to say that straight up is malpractice. That type of game plan against Baltimore, this type of offensive performance, that right there will get Arthur Smith fired. I'll call that right now. He's going to be fired. And honestly, he should be. That is a performance that should get you fired. Your identity is to run the ball, and you ran 8 times. That's not, throwing the ball down the field is not who you are. You don't have the offensive firepower to do that. So why were you trying to do that? And I can get, Baltimore's defensive numbers in the secondary haven't been great. Well, guess what? In the second half of the year, they've been one of the best pass defenses in the entire NFL. What are we doing here, Pittsburgh? What is this? Like, this is absolute just despicable garbage. It's all garbage. Najee Harris had 6 carries for 17 yards, and Jaylen Warren had 2 carries for 6. You know, Baltimore knows who they are. I already said that before. They ran for 299 yards, right? You know, while that's a single-game franchise record for Baltimore, that's the most rushing yards the Steelers have ever allowed in the playoffs. And I think, if I'm not correct, if I'm not 100% sure on this, Steelers fans or someone or a good statistician, let me know in the comments. This might be the most rushing yards the Steelers have ever allowed in a game, if not the Mike Tomlin era. Absolutely despicable. This defense was deplorable. They were awful. It was so bad, it looked like they didn't even want to be there. It genuinely looked like they didn't want to be there. This team looked like a team that had lost 4 straight and were just limping their way into the playoffs. It looked horrible. It looked horrible. And they kind of played well in the third quarter and made it interesting for about half of it. But that was it. The fourth quarter, they went right back to being the bullied Steelers. And Cam Hayward, you could tell he was fighting. He was trying, but he can't do it himself. And then TJ Watt, right? Everyone talks about how he's the best defensive player in football. Didn't record a single stat in this game. Now, sure, in the third quarter, he did hurt his hand, came back in, which obviously kind of slowed him down naturally because, I mean, it's hard to be a pass rusher when you got an injured hand, when literally your hand is like one of the core foundations of what you do. So, sure, I will give a pass for that. But when he was on the field healthy, he did literally nothing. Nothing. Roger Rosengarten, the second round right tackle out of Washington, literally shut him down. And what a great moment for this guy, because earlier in the year, or not earlier in the year, like a few weeks ago, hit a clip of him talking to Myles Garrett where he said he was a nobody, went viral. That nobody just shut down one of the best defensive players in the entire NFL. This dude might be special. He might be special. That's a performance right there that will kickstart a career. Genuinely. And that's how that happens sometimes, by the way. That does happen. Usually a player will have that one dominant game and it just explodes everything. Look at his teammate Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry looked like a bust. And then he had his 238-yard game and the 99-yard touchdown run against Jacksonville, if you guys remember that, all those years ago. And it kickstarted his entire legendary career to this point. It put him on the map and he became literally a Hall of Famer overnight. He became a completely different running back after that game. And usually that's all it takes. And so to see Roger Rosengarten play that well, fantastic by you. But back to crapping on Pittsburgh here. The other issue of why they lost this game, 227 out of the 464 total yards that Baltimore had. Mind you, that's 49% of the entire total yards Baltimore had were after contact. The most allowed by any team this year, and I could be wrong on this might be the most allowed ever. It might actually be. I heard a couple people in Steelers forums talking about it. I'm not 100% sure on this, so someone let me know and verify that for me if you could. But even so, 227 yards after contact? Oh, this was just literally, like, this was a deplorable loss. This defense, quite literally, this might have been the worst performance the Steelers may have, like this might want to be one of the worst losses in franchise history for Pittsburgh. And it sounds dramatic, but I have never, even in the other previous 5 playoff losses that Pittsburgh's had, which we'll talk about in a second, I've never seen a Steelers team look so outmatched, look so lost, and completely unprepared. And I talked about before this game, if they lose, the Mike Tomlin need to be fired conversation has come back, and now it is louder than ever. It is literally as loud as it's ever been, and now there's a conversation. There is a legitimate conversation here because not only have they lost 6 straight playoff games, They haven't won one since 2017. In the first quarter, they've been outscored 73-0 in these 6 losses, and they've been outscored 143-47 in the first half. It's awful. At this point, what does Pittsburgh do? They've said he's staying, which, fine, I get it. But look, I'm going to be a little bit of a hot taker right here. You know me, I'm not really known for my hot takes, but here's a hot take. I'm going to jump to this side of the conversation. I don't want to hear about 18 straight winning seasons anymore. I don't want to hear it. Because at this point, it's kind of like, the Justin Herbert thing. In the regular season, yeah, he's great. But in terms of the holistic debate about someone, in this case, it's Mike Tomlin, having success in the playoff matters. And I'm not saying Mike Tomlin is a overrated coach, or I'm not going to say that he's bad and needs to be fired. No, I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say that because that's ignorant. But you have to acknowledge that there is a problem in Pittsburgh. There's a problem here. I don't know what the problem is. I don't know what the solution is. But there is a clear problem here that needs to be fixed. Because this is unacceptable. This is straight up unacceptable. And if it wasn't Mike Tomlin, if you want to, be on the side of Mike Tomlin here and show why he's such a great coach, almost any other coach in the NFL, after a loss like this, would be fired. Unironically, almost any other coach in this exact situation, that not named Mike Tomlin, and maybe not named like a couple other big head coaches, but like a lot of head coaches in this situation would be fired. They would be straight up fired. So, like I said, I'm not going to say Mike Tomlin needs to be fired. That's an ignorant thing to say. But at some point, something has to give. At some point, there has to be some type of change, or Pittsburgh is going to be stuck in this loop forever. Because now it's kind of like that same conversation where you're not bad enough to get the top pick that you need to change your franchise, but you're not good enough to go all the way. Sure, you're winning, you're constantly having a winning season, going to the playoffs, which probably 20 plus teams in the NFL would kill for that type of consistency, right? But at some point, it's relative because for Pittsburgh Steelers fans, at this point, yeah, you're a winning franchise. It's been like that ever since your existence, right? The 70s, they were a good franchise. In the 80s, they were kind of mid in the 80s, but they were mostly fine. The 90s, they were good. The 2000s, they were great, right? 2010s, they've been great. So eventually, it does get to a point where, sure, you're winning a lot, but the ultimate goal is to win the Super Bowl. And we need more. The Steelers need more out of everybody. And it feels like, in my opinion, Mike Tomlin's probably just going to stay for a little while longer. We're talking a few more years, whatever. Like, that's probably going to remain the same. But this honestly kind of feels like an Andy Reid in Philadelphia situation brewing. Because Andy Reid in Philadelphia, if you guys remember, when he was the head coach of the Eagles, he constantly was getting close and close and close, doing well in the playoffs, had great teams every year, but could never get to the big one. Well, he did get to the big one once, he lost to the Patriots, but could never really, take that team over the top. And then he ended up being fired, went to KC, and the rest is history over there. So this feels like a situation that could be like that, but we'll just have to follow that and see. But that's enough. That is enough from me ranting about the Pittsburgh Steelers. That probably went on for 15 minutes. Not exactly how long I wanted to talk about it, but considering that it's been days upon days of it just sitting on my chest, now I got it off, and here you go. I hope you guys enjoyed it. A little preemptive Shumake take rant, if you will, if you guys remember those. Next up on our list, the Bills defeated the Broncos 31-7. Bills get a solid, defining win, proving why they deserve to be there. And for Denver, they were just happy to be there. Here's an interesting bit that I didn't talk about in my preview of this game. The Broncos had the most sacks in the NFL, and the Bills had allowed the least amount of sacks in the NFL. So this is going to be a very interesting battle. I had learned about this right before the game started. So I was like, wow, not only did I miss a key piece of content to talk about for the preview, but hey, that's an interesting storyline to follow. And it was pretty lopsided. Yeah, it was pretty darn lopsided. But in a way, for the Bills, it was similar. The win was similar to Baltimore's. Ran the ball a ton, dominated time of possession. They held the ball for 41 minutes. Denver is 18. They also held the ball for over 2/3 of the game, which you're going to win the game that way. And it started out interesting. Bo Nix on the third play of the game threw a bomb to Troy Franklin for a touchdown, and for a moment it felt like we were going to have a game. And something that I was thinking about in my mind was this Bills defense has been a little shaky in these final weeks of the year, right? They allowed 40 to the Rams. They allowed 40 to the Lions, right? So, this kind of felt like, oh, crap. Now, all right, time for Josh Allen to really put the team on his back and get into a shootout. That's kind of what it felt like for a moment. And then as they started pulling away, it went from 7-0, then 7-7, 10-7, 13-7, 21-7, 28-7, and then 31-7, which ended up being the final score. The Broncos did not score a point after that, but I want to give them a little bit of credit because they were in this game for a while. They had missed a field goal before halftime, which was unfortunate. It would have made it 10-10, but Denver's defense made Buffalo stall out in the red zone multiple times and forced 3 points multiple times. They ran a fake punt in this game and got it. They were trying to win this game. They were, fighting. They were competing. They didn't give up at any point. And, shout out to Denver. We'll talk more about Denver at the end and give them a little bit more props. But I am kind of proud of how Denver fought. I know it wasn't a good game, but considering that, given the circumstances of their year and whatnot, again, we'll elaborate on the end, I wasn't, in a way, I was kind of impressed. I wish I would have seen more because I thought this team was better than that. But at the same time, you got to commend with how hard they were fighting and the fact that for a moment, they've had this game pretty interesting, which was more than I think a lot of people expected. But going back to Buffalo, in the third quarter, they started throwing a little bit more. They made some adjustments, and it worked. And then Josh Allen ran around, threw the touchdown on fourth down to Ty Johnson, which was the straw that ended up being the straw that broke the camel's back. And beautiful, beautiful touchdown, by the way. You want to talk about, Lamar Jackson creating and being a fantastic playmaker? Josh Allen was right there doing the same stuff, man. He was doing the exact same stuff. It was fantastic to watch. And then the first play of the fourth quarter, Josh Allen hit Curtis Samuel for a 55-yard touchdown and, kind of just piled on a little bit more. The cool thing I want to talk about this for a split second. The cool thing to see here, I don't know why my chair is squeaking so much. If you guys can hear that, I'm sorry. But a cool thing to see is quarterbacks sometimes, you can see how they feel about a throw. Because that touchdown of Curtis Samuel, he kind of just rolled to his right a little bit and kind of just, flipped it up there. Just kind of floated it up there. And Curtis Samuel, when the camera panned to him, was wide open and he ran it in. And, obviously the quarterback saw that and threw it. But then you see, obviously when you just do that, you could just feel that there was a big play coming. Because, look at how effortless, look at how calm Josh Allen was, right? You can see that. That was cool to see that. And then looking at some of these other games and watching it afterward, looking at, quarterbacks try and throw an out route or throw a deep in route, and you can see them kind of really step and put some more oomph and put more of their back into the throw to make sure it gets where it needs to go on time. So, you can really, seeing the mechanics of a quarterback work and seeing how their body reacts to certain situations from what they need to do, it's pretty cool. It's pretty darn cool to look at it because, you can kind of, in a way, sometimes you can really, I don't know, they feel, but you can kind of see the quarterback doing their thing. You can kind of see the gears turning in their head, which is pretty cool. It is a pretty cool thing to see, and it's a pretty cool observation that I wanted to share with you guys that I made, that I made, found, saw, whatever. But that was pretty cool. And Josh Allen on the day finished 20-26, 272 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was fantastic. Curtis Samuel ended up being the leading receiver with 68 yards and a touchdown. Khalil Shakir had 6 for 61, continuing to be a great chain mover for them, which, by the way, I found out that he, in the regular season, he was second in the NFL in yards after the catch behind Jamar Chase, which, Khalil Shakir has made his money on that so far, and that's why he's been so good, because they've been able to get him in space, which they did in this game. Dalton Kincaid had 47 yards. He had a big catch in the fourth quarter over the shoulder. It was a beautiful throw. And then Dawson Knox, 2 catches, 38 yards. Mac Hollins had one 19-yard catch and also had a hit on special teams. That was really fun. The Broncos returner didn't call for a fair catch and got absolutely leveled, which got the crowd all hyped up. It was fun. And looking at the yards per catch numbers, again, just like Baltimore here, 22.7, 10.2, 15.7, 19, 8 different players caught a pass. It was the same formula. And there's a reason why playoff football, running the ball is a lot more important, because dominating time of possession matters. It really does matter, and being able to run the ball well and keep your quarterback clean and efficient is so much more important. And with some of the best teams in the AFC, there you go. I mean, now you see it in action. It makes perfect sense, right? And then James Cook, 23 carries, 120 yards, and a touchdown. Fantastic. Josh Allen himself had 8 runs for 46. Ty Johnson had 9 carries for 44. 41 carries in total. Bingo. That's a winning formula. That is the winning formula right there. And this defense was great. While they didn't get a lot of pressure on Bo Nix, Denver's offensive line was honestly pretty darn good this year. Really didn't look into it too much, but after the game, really thinking about it, I was like, wow, they actually are a pretty good unit this year. They really stepped up. But they made plays in the secondary. They limited the deep shots that Denver really thrives on, their offense thrives on doing. And they just had a great performance. And looking at the keys, minimize turnovers, they had 0. Create turnovers, they didn't have a fumble or an interception, but they did get 2 fourth-down stops and a missed field goal, so 3 turnovers on downs. That works. Well, the missed field goal wasn't a turnover on downs. That was right before halftime. But either way, that's missed points. And then unleashing Josh Allen, they did. Denver could not maintain their gap integrity consistently. And the touchdown of Ty Johnson was the icing on the cake of all of that. Also, Buffalo used a lot of deep dropbacks, which is pretty interesting, which is another observation I made when I was really analyzing Josh Allen. Because when you think about a deep drop back, Josh Allen has one of the best arms in the NFL. You can send him back a couple yards, and his arm talent can compensate for the additional yards he's backing up for, right? He can compensate for that, which is having a elite dynamic quarterback with an elite arm. That's why arm talent matters so much in the NFL, right? Because you can do stuff like that, compensate for it, and what that ends up happening is it really encourages these rushers to. Obviously they're getting after Josh Allen. Maybe not encourage, that's not the right word. But when you have to go for more yards to get to Josh Allen, right? It literally just creates a bigger lane to step in, or to step through and run, or it creates a bigger pocket to step into. Because when you have all this stretch, you get these guys outside, the pocket and the lane right here is much bigger. Likewise, if you're getting right here, this entire left or right side of the field is wide open. It's wide open. And Josh Allen, like I said, has the arm talent to compensate for a bigger drop back. So being able to use that and help him out, obviously was the big key here. It was a really cool little tweak that they made to their game plan to help Josh Allen get out and compete against the best defense in the NFL at maintaining gap integrity and containing quarterbacks. So really cool observation I made there. And they ran the ball for 210 yards, had 246 passing yards, and honestly dominated the game and offensively had almost perfect balance, as all things should be. And now they move on to face Baltimore, and we're going to talk about this one pretty heavily in the divisional round preview video that I recommend you guys watching immediately after this one. So, because this one's going to be good. This might be the best game of the entire playoffs, in my opinion. Concluding with Denver, going back to Denver, I should say, going with Bo Nix. He ended up finishing with 144 yards and a touchdown. Not the greatest day, obviously, but honestly, given the situation, he did what he could. This team really didn't help him. Cortland Sutton had 5 catches, 75 yards. He was good. And then Troy Franklin had the big touchdown, ended up finishing with 54 yards on the day, but no one else went over 15 yards receiving. That's not good enough. That's simply not good enough. And then running the ball, Bo Nix was the leading rusher with 43 yards. And then Javonte Williams had 7 for 29. No one else went over 10. 17 carries for 75 yards is not going to be a good enough formula to help your quarterback. And defensively, they fought hard. They fought hard the whole game and tried their best. But in the end, you look at Denver, in my opinion, teams that they went up against that had, in my opinion, top 10 quarterbacks, they were 1-6 in the regular season. and this loss makes them 1-7, and that kind of checks out. Honestly. And going back to the game plan, they didn't help Bo Nix, did not contain Josh Allen, and, either way, in a way, who cares? I'm not going to say, like, oh, you shouldn't care that the Broncos lost. Like, I'm not going to say that to Broncos fans because obviously the loss hurts. It sucks. But at the same time, I don't think no one expected the Broncos to have the season that they did. If you would have told me back in August that the Broncos would be in the playoffs, I probably would have laughed in your face and said, you're ridiculous. Like, you're legitimately ridiculous. But this team was one of the most surprising in the NFL this year. And congratulations. I mean, what a year that they had. I want to talk more about it in predictions versus reality when that video comes out for Denver. But right now, I mean, there's no way around it. The future looks as bright as it ever has in Denver. It literally looks brighter than it's had in a long, long time. All right, Packers, Eagles. Eagles defeating Green Bay 22-10. Eagles overcoming offensive struggles and finding their inner excellence. Hey. And the Packers get beaten, battered, and became fried cheese. And not the good fried cheese that you get at the state fair. If you haven't had fried cheese, by the way, it's pretty darn good. Not good for you, and it makes your stomach hurt, but hey, it's pretty good. It's a pretty good thing. But you're talking about the Packers getting absolutely cooked or fried in that context. This game was going to be rough from the opening kickoff. When Keyshawn Nixon fumbled the opening kickoff, Philly recovered it and immediately went on for a touchdown. And look, did Nixon recover the football? Yes, but in my opinion, don't fumble the football. Don't lose possession of the ball. Sorry, don't do that. Don't fumble. That doesn't happen. And ultimately, this play set the tone because on the touchdown throw to Jahan Dotson, who got his first touchdown as an Eagle, by the way, congratulations to you. The Eagles had engaged Jalen Hurts 6.7 seconds to throw. 6.7. The pocket, there was no one within 5 yards of Jalen Hurts, and he just stood there. He could have literally got down on his knees, prayed to God, got back up, and would have had enough time to throw a touchdown pass. Like, what? And that's at the tone. After that, it was just all Eagles for the most part in this game. And continuing on with how this game kind of went, Jordan Love on their first drive of the game throws, or maybe the second drive of the game, throws an interception, throwing to Dontavian Wicks on a vertical route. Darius Slay picks it off. He's a great corner. That's just a great corner making a big play. I don't really fault Jordan Love for that very much just because, that's a play that happens. It's a great corner that made a great play, right? That was why he's called Big Play Slay. Bingo. And then the defense stepped up and started playing well. They held the Eagles overall to 2 of 11 on third down. And they played well the majority of the game. The second half, the offense finally came to life and they got some points, but it was a little too late. And Jayden Reed and Josh Jacobs were the only players on offense really doing anything. And then Jayden Reed got hurt. Romeo Doubs got hurt. And I think, what's the other receiver there? It was Romeo Doubs, Jayden Reed, and then Christian Watson. I don't think Christian Watson played. I didn't even think did his number get even called? I don't remember. Huh. Packers fans, let me know about that. Fill me in on that. I can't remember. That's interesting. But either way, the starting left guard was the big one because the backup came in, was awful. He got benched. Then the third stringer came in, and he was also equally as bad. The right tackle went out at the end, but it was, kind of the game was already over at that point. But, it's hard to win with all those injuries. And going back to Philly, Jalen Hurts finished with 131 yards, 2 touchdowns, 13 and 21. Not the greatest day on paper, but look, he was coming off the concussion. He had missed the past couple of games, and they used a lot of safe throws, made an effort to run the ball well and help him out, and that's what you wanted to see. I respect that. Obviously, in order to move on the playoffs, you're going to have to do better than that, but given the circumstances, I like it. I like that you're just, kind of making it easy on Jalen Hurts. Don't make things too complicated. Coming off a concussion, that's a tough situation to come back from, especially in the playoffs. So I respect it. The game plan there was pretty good. And Devontae Smith had 4 catches for 55 yards. Dallas Goedert ended up finishing with 47. Had that amazing touchdown where he kind of trucked in a way, but he was kind of down, losing his balance, was able to regain his balance, and was stiff-armed that defender twice going into the end zone. Absolutely insane play, which, by the way, the whole reason why that happened was because the defender, I guess it looked like Dallas Goedert was going to fall down, and he, planted his feet, lost all of his leverage, and when Dallas Goedert back up, he simply just didn't have the positioning, speed, nor momentum to be able to compensate, and he just got destroyed. He got utterly and completely destroyed. And then A.J. Brown, 1 catch, 10 yards, reading inner excellence. The cameras caught him reading that book, and shout out to the author of that book. I can't remember your name, but hey, shout out to you because his book immediately became the #1 selling book on Amazon and made that guy a fortune. So, hey, cool stuff, man. Full circle moment there. Helping a young author out, making a book. And now, guess what? I think I might actually get that book and read it. Not much of a reader. But if A.J. Brown is reading it during a game, after having 1 catch for 10 yards, hey, you know what? There's something I could probably learn from that thing. So, continuing, Saquon Barkley ended up having 25 carries for 119 yards. He had a touchdown run at the end, but kneeled down to run the game out. Classy. I don't think anybody would have blamed him if he ran it all the way. But hey, you know what? Game's over. Kneel down. Get down so your team can kneel down and just go win the game, move on. Good stuff. This is why Saquon Barkley going to Philly was fantastic, because not only was he getting a great player, you're getting a great dude and a great teammate. Literally, that's literally Saquon Barkley in a nutshell right there. I love this guy. I absolutely love this guy. He's a great human being. That's why I love NFL players sometimes. Like, there's certain players that I really, really love, and it's because not only are they great players, but they are fantastic human beings off the field. And it's like, it's awesome. It's absolutely awesome. But anyways, Jalen Hurts also finished with 36 yards on 6 runs. This defense, though, was the big takeaway here. They were incredible. Secondary played almost lights out. They broke up a bunch of passes. They forced Jordan Love to hold the ball for a long time, multiple times in this game. They got the 4 turnovers. They looked like a top 3 defense. They looked like the top 3 defense that they were. And to help out Jalen Hurts in his situation, fantastic job. Fantastic performance. And looking at, their keys, the first one is to have offensive balance. I would say, but at the same time, Jalen Hurts was coming off the concussion, right? So they were able to compensate for it and figure it out. And efficiency, they were held to 4 of 14 on 3rd down, but they did hold Green Bay to 2-11 on 3rd down. But in the second half, they did play better. They did play better and was much better at sustaining drives. And so there was improvement there. So I would give it efficiency. Okay, I'll give it like half a point. You were like halfway there. Fine. But then the third one, don't let pressure sink in. Check. Big check. As long as you play well and just keep the game in your hands, Philly fans are going to love you. And that's what happened. And to conclude, they looked shaky at first. Obviously, again, the concussion. I'm not going to say it anymore. I'm sorry. But against LA, they're going to need to start fast because LA had a great performance against Minnesota. We'll talk about it at the end of the show. But the start that they had against Green Bay can't happen against LA. But that'll be for the preview video of the divisional round, which again, check it out when you're done watching this video. Continuing with Jordan Love, ended up finishing 20 of 33, 212 yards, no touchdowns, 3 interceptions. The first one was that deep shot to Dontavian Wicks, that big play Slay picked off. The second one was horrible. Zach Bond, he just didn't see Zach Bond. He tried to throw it over the middle. Think it was to Jayden Reed. Got picked off. He just jumped around and got it. Zach Bond, by the way, what a guy. He was an All-Pro this year, 151 total tackles, first year as a starter, and he was a special teams guy in New Orleans for a while, and he only had 88 tackles his entire time there and had 151 in his first year with Philly. And looking at his numbers were very comparable to when Luke Kuechly won Defensive Player of the Year in like 2015 or like 2014 or something like that. It was impressive. He had a really impressive season, and so to see him come to Philly and play really well alongside his teammate Nakobe Dean, those 2 linebackers are great. They're a big cornerstone of this defense and why they're so good. And Zach Bond, what a guy. I mean, what a guy and what a year he's had, man. It's really, really cool. But going back to the interceptions, the third one, it was just a prayer. He just threw it up into the end zone. Quinn Mitchell picks it off. First career interception for him. Congratulations to you. This guy should probably be Defensive Rookie of the Year. Absolutely played out of his mind. And then Jayden Reed had 46 yards. He was the leading receiver. Josh Jacobs ended up having 40. Dontavious Wicks had 39. Tucker Kraft had 5 catches for 26 yards and a 4th down conversion. It was okay. Not great, but better than what the stats would indicate. And then Josh Jacobs had 18 carries for 81 yards and a touchdown. Josh Jacobs was the best player on this team. He was good. But, it wasn't, they literally just cannot get anything else out of this offense. And defensively, they did play mostly great. They did play pretty darn well. And shout out to defensive coordinator Jeff Hafley. They got their DC. They got their guy there. And so it makes you feel more confident going into next year. And in the first half, they did contain Saquon Barkley pretty well. Obviously, they were great on third down. But the offense simply just did not do enough to help them. And, looking at their keys that it had, for them to win, run the ball well. Sure, they did it. They ran the ball pretty well. The next one, though, an offensive playmaker needing to step up. Did that happen? No. That simply did not happen. No player on in the receiving room stepped up. And then getting turnovers, that's a flat out no. They did not. They had 4 turnovers. The 3 picks and the fumble in the opening kickoff. Not going to win football games like that. And what really killed the Packers, obviously, were the interceptions, Jordan Love playing bad, the injuries, and the penalties, which are also really, really bad. A majority of them were caused by the backup guards when the left guard went out. They were mostly responsible. Obviously, they were awful in this game, and it really slowed things down even more. But Green Bay's season's over, and they go out with the whimper. And now a lot of questions begin to swirl because now the is Jordan Love overrated conversation is starting to happen. And the Packers, it's been proven that they need an elite receiver. I thought one of these guys, young guys, would step up and become that wide receiver one for them. And after 2 years, I don't know if any of those guys are going to take that next step. And that's okay. I mean, but they're going to need someone else in there to really elevate this group. And there's now rumors swirling that Devontae Adams could be going back to Green Bay, which if that's the case, I'm all for that. That'd be a cool thing and really get a great receiver to help Jordan Love and honestly would really make this passing game improve exponentially. But that'll be a conversation for another day. Alrighty, moving on to the Commanders defeating the Buccaneers 23-20. The Commanders doink their way to their first playoff win since 2005. And Tampa gave it all they got, but the one costly mistake dug their grave, sunk their ship. Big takeaway here. Big plays happened on third down a lot. Almost every big play in this game happened on third down, which is kind of what I expected. Considering how bad both of these teams wanted to win, I expected the biggest moments, the biggest plays were to happen. That checked out. And also the aggression thing was mostly legit, especially on the Commanders side. They went for it on fourth down 5 times. 5 times. Whoopee. Like, I called that. I said that these teams needed to be aggressive, and it happened. And then for Tampa, Baker Mayfield at one point in the second quarter trucked Bobby Wagner, literally laid his shoulder down and hit him. I don't know about you, but ain't no other quarterback in the NFL doing what Baker did. Ain't nobody doing that. Ain't nobody throwing their shoulder down and trucking a linebacker, especially Bobby Wagner, of all people. I get it, he's older now, but still. Come on. That's awesome. That was awesome. And continuing on with me calling stuff, again, I'm not a guy that likes that, that toots my horn a lot, but sometimes I just kind of have to because it gets me so excited. The first play of the game for Tampa was a pass to Mike Evans. Now, like in retrospect, I wish I had put money on that. I wish I had put money on. My throat's getting sore. I wish I had put money on that. And it wasn't a deep shot. But I was right about Tampa attacking the secondary early. The first couple drives, they were going after it. And then the Commanders' first drive of the game, they went for it on fourth down, didn't get it. And Tampa, was kind of in control a little bit. But Washington, on their next drive, started attacking Tampa's secondary. And eventually they got the touchdown to De'Ami Brown, which gave them an early lead. And then right before the half, Tampa gets down to the 1 yard line. Commanders get a PI call. I just sorry. I just did something to my tooth and it's really uncomfortable. But the Commanders get an awful pass interference call. And to put Tampa at the 1, Baker throws a touchdown to Mike Evans. An absolute dot between two defenders. Very risky throw, but hey, Baker Mayfield's been a gunslinger all year. That's a throw that Baker Mayfield's going to try and do, and he got it. So, beautiful throw, great execution. And in the third quarter, Tampa really started to gain control. They made a goal line stand and forced 3 points. And then Washington got a couple penalties, got the run game going, but they couldn't convert. Baker Mayfield eventually got back on the field, threw a touchdown to Bucky Irving. They really got the run game going, too, on that drive. And then despite all the penalties that Washington kept on racking up, they were able to clean them up in the fourth quarter. And Tampa got their first critical penalty of the game that put Washington at the 1. And then something crazy happened. The Bucs got a goal line stand. They were at the 1 yard line, got all the way to fourth down, forced the incomplete pass to fourth down, got a turnover. Sure, it was a missed PI, but Jayden Daniels missed Alamedai Zacchaeus underneath for a wide open touchdown. So can't miss that. And then Baker on the next drive gets the ball moving, and then it happened. The turnover that ended up being what caused the swing of the game. It was supposed to be an end around not an end around. It was supposed to be a quick jet sweep to Jalen McMillan. Ball comes out, juts into McMillan's side instead of his hands. Ball falls out. Commanders recover. And then Tampa almost made a goal line stand. And on fourth down, the second time, they simply could not stop Jayden Daniels. Terry McLaurin gets a touchdown and gives the Commanders a lead. And that ultimately ended up being the swing. That ultimately ended up being the play that defined the game. Because Tampa, they did march down the field. But on 3rd and inches, center Graham Barton and Baker, they had a miscommunication on the snap count and came out early. Baker wasn't ready for it and had to preemptively hand it off. Ended up being a 4-yard loss. And they had to get a field goal with 4:40 left to go. And then when that happened, honestly, it felt like this game was over. Because something told me that the Commanders are going to drive down the field, run the clock out, and call it a day. The offense was in full gear. They were woken up, and that's exactly what they did. They ran just quickly, or not quickly, but they slowly and surely worked their way down the field and ended up hitting the game winner, which we'll talk about in a second. But in the end, Todd Bowles, instead of using timeouts early to give his offense a chance to get off, the defense to get off the field and give the ball back to Tampa, to Baker with enough time, he let the clock run below a minute and then started using timeouts, and it eliminated their chance at a comeback. And then, essentially, in my opinion, if they got off the field, but the third down where they could have got off the field, Jayden Daniels, with Kalijah Cansey in his face, was able to stiff arm him, get around, and get a first down. I'm going to put the image on screen right now of this play. Look at this. This was a first down. Now, if you want to talk about Jayden Daniels being fantastic, that play right there is probably going to be one of the defining moments of his career. Because that play right there was the one that gave him the win. And then Zane Gonzalez came out there, hit the kick, went into the goalpost, but bounced in for the game winner. Jayden Daniels becomes the 4th rookie quarterback to win a road playoff game. And in this game, he was fantastic. Finished 24-35, 268 yards, 2 touchdowns. And he was the leading rusher, 13 carries for 36 yards. But he was fantastic in this game. Put the team on his back like he's done all year round. Played in the fourth quarter, played his best in the fourth quarter like he's done all year. Terry McLaurin finished with 7 catches, 89 yards, had the touchdown. De'Ami Brown had 5 for 89 and a touchdown. He was fantastic in this game. The rest of the guys, well, they didn't get a lot of catches. There was a lot of chain moving. They got a lot of efficient plays out of this passing game. And the fact that, they didn't run the ball very well, it didn't matter. Tampa's secondary got destroyed over and over and over again in this game. And in the fourth quarter, they started committing penalties. They started, letting themselves get killed on drives. And it slowed them down. It really slowed them down, and it exposed, the big issue with Tampa. Well, I shouldn't say exposed, but it really highlighted the big issue with Tampa, which was their secondary. And continuing with Washington here, defensively, simply was not a great performance. They were inconsistent. They allowed Mike Evans to cook them. Marshawn Lattimore, who was on Mike Evans all game long, got absolutely cooked. He was awful in this game. The penalties, obviously, were terrible. But ultimately, they stopped the run in the first half. They were able to get after Baker and slow down this passing game at certain points. And recovering the fumble was huge. And that, like I said, ended up being the swing that gave the Commanders the win. And attacking the secondary was their first key to the game. They did that. That gets a yes from me. They did it. The second one, keep clean, no negative plays. Mostly, the penalties, obviously, they only allowed 1 sack and then 0 turnovers. They didn't turn the ball over. And then the third key, forcing turnovers, that fumble recovery was the turnover that they needed. And I said this before the game in the preview video. The team that wins the turnover battle will win this game. And they won the turnover battle. And then going into aggression, the first play running the ball, no. But aggression overall, which is the kind of overall point of that key, yes. Like I said, they went for it on 4th down 5 times. They showed no fear. We don't care. We're not scared. They attacked this secondary. They kept clean and didn't have a lot of negative plays. They they got the turnover, and they were aggressive. The 4 keys that they needed to do to win, they did it. And it wasn't 100% perfect, but they did it and got the job done. It got the job done, and now they moved to Detroit. And now they're going to, Detroit, I think they're going to ultimately win. That's a spoiler for the next video. But I think Washington's going to bring some heat. I think they're going to bring some firepower. And now there's memes going around with Dan Quinn and Dan Campbell, the Battle of the Dans. I just thought about that. Oh, my God. That's pretty cool. The Battle of the Dans. Dan Quinn and Dan Campbell. But they're going to be no field goals, going forward on 4th down, just straight vibes. If you guys seen the meme, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, look it up. It's pretty cool. So it'll be an interesting game to watch. I think Washington's going to bring some heat. And we move on to Tampa, where Baker ended up being 15 of 18, 185 yards, 2 touchdowns. Fine, but simply not good enough. The fumble was just, it in the moment, like, it was super shocking. But in retrospect, looking back on it, it was like, oh my God, like, why? Why did that have to happen right then and there? You got the 4th down stop on defense, and you got a 3rd down conversion to get out of your end zone, and then the fumble happened, and it's like, oh my God. Like, if that couldn't have happened at a worse time. It couldn't have happened at a worse time. If it happened in the red zone, it would have been pretty bad, but hey, at least, the Commanders are pinned back. No, you literally gave them the ball in the red zone. And that ultimately was the play that gave the Commanders the win. And other than getting the ball to Mike Evans, they didn't get enough consistent deep shots down the field with the rest of their receivers. And Evans finished with 92 yards off of 7 catches and the touchdown, which he was great. Jalen McMillan had 2 catches for 41 yards. Cade Otton had 2 for 32. But other than that, that was it. That was really it. No one else really did much of anything. And then Bucky Irving had 17 carries for 77 yards. And Rachaad White had 1 carry for 1 yard. And I get that, looking back on it, Rachaad White really didn't get that many carries at the end of the year. It was mostly Bucky Irving hauling the weight. Or, carrying the weight on that side. But, I mean, the Commanders' defense run defense was not that good this year. And they simply didn't do enough there. And then, defensively, the secondary really just fell apart. And that's one of the big issues that have been on this team. And those 2 things right there were ultimately what did them in. But I want to give a little bit of credit to this defensive line. They played fantastic in this game. They brought the juice, they brought the energy, but honestly, they did a great job containing Jayden Daniels. Yes, he got out of the pocket in his own end zone and converted a third down. And yes, the third down to ice the game happened when Calijah was right there to make the tackle and couldn't make it. But other than that, Calijah and Yaya Diaby, they were everywhere for Tampa. But they just had a heck of a game. This defensive line had a heck of a game, and the formula that they came up with for containing Jayden Daniels mostly worked. It mostly worked. And that'll be something that, Washington will have to be able to compensate for going into next week, because you're going up against Aaron Glenn and this Detroit defense that just, before the wild card game, dismantled one of the best offenses in the league in Minnesota in Week 18. So they're good at making game plans. So it'll be something to look at going into that game. But Tampa, their defensive line was great. They were just fantastic, and it sucks because their secondary really let them down. And moving into their keys holistically here, bringing it all together, attacking with Bucky Irving and White against this bad run defense for Commanders, they didn't. 18 carries between these two guys, that's not good enough. And then keeping clean, no, they didn't do that. The penalties in the secondary and the O-line and the offensive line hurt them in the second half, and the fumble, again, was the play that made the game. And then the third one containing Daniels and keeping a spy on them all game long, that does get a resounding yes. They did that, and they did keep a spy on him all game long. It was a different player at times, but the formula was working. Jayden Daniels ran the ball 13 times, but only got 36 yards. His running ability was, mostly a non-factor. He just was fantastic and killed them in the pocket because the secondary wasn't that good for Tampa. So, in terms of the formula to contain him, it worked, and that gets a resounding yes. And the first play, attacking the secondary and being aggressive, yeah, the first play I called that, but aggressiveness, no. They did not go for it on fourth down at all. And after the third inches where Graham Barton and Baker have the miscommunication on the snap count and end up being a 4-yard loss, you're in opponent territory. You had momentum on your side. In that situation, you got to go for it. You got to go for it, and instead of settling for the tie, you got to go for it and try and get the lead. Because that would have been a big difference in this game for Washington, and that didn't happen. And overall, stuff like that was why this loss was on the coaching staff mostly. They didn't have a good enough game plan on offense to really attack where Washington was weak. The secondary simply was not addressed well enough in the offseason, which is really, come to light throughout the entire season, and especially in this game. And then Todd Bowles had terrible clock management at the end that just kind of sealed their fate. But Tampa had a great year. I don't want to take that away from them too much, because people thought that they'd take a step back, and once again, they proved that they are good, and they have the pieces in place to be great once again. But a loss like this sucks, because you were at home, they were in this game, and just a couple little plays were the things that did them in, and simply just did not do enough, which is unfortunate. But overall, we'll talk more about it in prediction versus reality, but overall, they had a good year, and this game was the best game out of the wildcard round entirely, by far. So that does stand for something. And let me take a sip of water. Excuse me, sorry. We move on to the Rams defeating the Vikings 27-9. The Rams defense shocking the world on Monday Night Football, while Minnesota's playoff demons came. I said before this game, the playoff demons are coming. The demons are coming. I said that. And not only did they come in and take over, Sam Darnold's ghosts also came in and took over once again. One thing quick, this game was played in Arizona because the fires in Los Angeles are obviously terrible. A lot of people losing their homes. It's a really unfortunate situation, and I feel for all the people that have lost lost their homes, lost their livelihoods. Terrible, terrible stuff. But shout out to the Arizona Cardinals, man. Not only did they allow, these two teams to hold their playoff game in their stadium, but they painted the field for the Rams. They sent the team planes to LA so they can get all their team can get all their coaches, all the players, their families, all great stuff. All great stuff and a lot of class from the Arizona Cardinals. So shout out to them for making this game happen. But going into the game, it was quite literally all Rams. I can't even recap the game in terms of what happened because for the Vikings end, it was so boring. It was so boring to watch. And the Rams, this defense, have made the statement of the entire playoff so far. More than Baltimore getting their dominant win over Pittsburgh. More than the Commanders getting their first playoff win since 2005. Right? This defense completely shut this offense down. And looking at the Viking stats, you would say that, they didn't shut them down. But I don't care. This Rams defensive line shut them down. Completely broke them apart. This defensive line had one of the greatest performances I think I may have ever seen watching football. And I've watched a ton of football throughout my life. That might have been if not the greatest performance I think I've ever seen a defensive line have. They played out of their minds. 9 sacks. 9 sacks. Absolutely phenomenal. They held the Vikings to 6 of 17 on third down, 1 of 4 on fourth down. Had the forced fumble that led to a touchdown. Jared Verse picked it up and ran it. Absolutely amazing moment for that team. They were able to pick off Sam Darnold one time. And looking at the sack numbers, Byron Young, second-year edge rusher, right? 1.5 sacks. Neville Gilmore, 1.5 sacks. Kobe Turner, 2 sacks. Desjuan Johnson had a sack. Michael Hockett and Braden Fisk both got half a sack. And then the DBs, Kobe Durant and Akello Witherspoon, each got a sack. The one by Witherspoon was the fumble that was forced. That was the one that forced the ball out of Sam Darnold's hands, where Jared Verse picked up, ran for a touchdown. Did not explain that very well, but we get the point. I think I explained it good enough, so at least we know what happened. But I really have never seen anything like this at all. And then offensively, it was clean. Matthew Stafford, 19-27, 209 yards, 2 touchdowns. Puka Nacua had 5 catches for 44 yards. Tyler Higbee had 558. He did get hurt, which is unfortunate because he was having a really, really good game and he was really dominating. And honestly, he was the best receiver that they had all night. But Cooper Kupp had a 29-yard catch. Demarcus Robinson had a 23-yard catch. 8 players caught a ball. And again, just like Baltimore, just like Buffalo, distributing the ball and getting everybody involved. And then Kyron Williams had 16 carries, 76 rushing yards, had a receiving touchdown, which put him on the board first. Wasn't perfect, but what caused this offense to have success? They hit their first key of the game. First key I had for the Rams was to deceive this defense and challenge their discipline. They did that perfectly. Heavy play action, counters, and the lineup on the opening drive, they lined up on fourth down, and they got the Vikings to jump. They really challenged them. And there was a point where they really weren't running the ball, but they were still getting shots down the field with play action. They were really testing the integrity and mentality of this defense. They did that, and they deceived them, which is what they needed to do. They out-schemed guys, got guys open. What they needed to do, they did it perfectly. And then, did they get everyone involved? Yes, they did. Wasn't perfect, but Cooper Kupp had 1 catch, Demarcus Robinson had 1 catch, but they were big catches, and 8 or 9 players caught a pass for them. So hey, they got everybody involved. They said they needed to do that because they don't have the firepower to go toe for toe with the Vikings, and so they were able to play their brand of football, and it worked. And then the third key was this defensive line has to play perfect. It doesn't get better than that. It does not get better than 9 sacks and completely dismantling Sam Darnold. This team will go to face Philadelphia next week. But this Ram defensive line and this Eagles offensive line, this might be one of the most interesting storylines to watch going into the divisional round. It might actually be, because now, like, with the performance that they had, we got a test. Like, you beat the Vikings defensive line, or offensive line, excuse me. The Eagles offensive line is a completely different ball game. Here's your real test to see if you're for real and this young defensive line can show up. But moving to Sam Darnold and this Vikings team, he was 25 of 40, 245 yards, had a touchdown, had an interception. Awful. Sam Darnold was unequivocally awful in this game. And in my opinion, he had the second worst performance of the entire playoff so far. He wasn't as bad as Justin Herbert, but wasn't as bad as Jordan Love. Jordan Love simply just wasn't getting enough help, in my opinion. Sure, the interceptions were, on him. He threw the passes. But at the same time, I mean, players were hurt and whatnot. We're not going to go back to that conversation. I already said my piece. But he was awful. The interception was terrible. Trying to throw an out route. It was late. Got picked off. And most of those sacks were on Sam Darnold. This dude was holding on to the ball for so long. And the people that were like bashing the Vikings offensive line, I get they were getting beat. But come on. You cannot hold the ball for 3 or 4 seconds and hang your offensive line out to dry. You can't do that. And then he didn't run around to extend plays enough, which he really did good at for some reason this year. Didn't do enough of it. And then he started, with that, the pressure made him start seeing ghosts again. Like he was in New York all over again. He was missing wide open receivers, especially Jalen Naylor, who got open a ton in the third quarter. He was just not seeing it. Not even when he was pressured, he was not seeing receivers open, and he was missing receivers wide open all the time. It was horrible. He had a bunch of horrible misses in this game. A bunch of them. And along with that, he didn't really have that much help either. Aaron Jones had 13 carries for 46 yards, and Cam Akers had 39 yards. But you take away the 26-yard run, and he finishes with 4 carries for 13 yards. 18 carries. What is this? What is this game plan? Again, with not being able to run the ball. And it's not really because they didn't run the ball. It's the fact that your quarterback and your offensive line was struggling. They were struggling a lot. And when they're struggling, how do you help them? By running the freaking football. You have to run the ball more. If Sam Darnold is taking sacks, you have to be able to run the ball and help them out and settle them down. And then, did they try to scheme guys open? Did they try and get some safe, short, easy throws to help Sam Darnold settle down and get comfortable? No, they didn't. They kept on trying to throw the ball down the field over and over and over again and play this regular Vikings offensive football. And guess what? It wasn't working. It wasn't working. At one point, they got sacked 6 times in the first half. At what point do you have to walk up? At one point do you have to go get, your head coach, Kevin O'Connell? At what point does it click in your head that you have to change what you were doing? At what point, when does it click? When does it click? They simply did not adapt. They simply did not adapt. And this defensive line continued to just crush Sam Darnold over and over and over again. And the game continued to get further and further and further out of hand because they simply did not make adjustments to help out this offensive line and help Sam Darnold out. They didn't do enough. Sam didn't do enough, and it's frustrating because this Vikings team was 14 wins. They're the first ever 14-win wild card team to ever exist. And this was the best they could do? Top 5 offense, top 5 defense, top 3 defense arguably? And that was the performance you'll put out there? 9 points? Oh, Lord. Oh, Lord. This was terrible. Terrible. Absolutely terrible. The leading receiver for Minnesota was TJ Hawkinson. He had 64 yards, had a 26-yard touchdown, which was nice. finally got something going for them. Justin Jefferson, 5 catches, 58 yards. He was locked up and double covered most of the game. Simply just wasn't, they weren't helping him get open. And then Jordan Addison had 3 catches for 21 yards. Jalen Naylor, who I mentioned, got open a bunch, and Sam Darnold didn't throw him the ball. Finished with 33 yards. 9 players caught a pass, but they did not do anything to help themselves out and mitigate this pass rush. Did they run a screen? I don't even think they ran a screen at all in this game. They may have ran like 1 or 2, but they really did not do anything to help this offense and mitigate this pass rush. They really literally did nothing. They tried doing typical Vikings offense, and they did not adapt. And defensively, they were mostly fine. Sure, they got deceived, and they got their integrity challenged, and they got out schemed a bunch. But the Rams have the playoff experience that the Vikings don't. Right? They haven't been in the playoffs for 2 years. And a lot of these guys, really have never been in the playoffs. This is Sam Darnold's first playoff game. I almost knocked my water bottle down. But looking at the keys, limiting Jared Verse, Braden Fisk, no, they did not do that. Not even close. Fitting your playmakers, not really. And then stretching this defense, no. They tried to be the typical Vikings offense, and they did not succeed at all. Again, first 14-win wildcard team, and they lost. And this loss goes to show the Vikings can never get out of their own way when they reach the playoffs. And while I really didn't talk about this, they had a very easy schedule. And their 4 losses on the year were to the Rams and the Lions. They lost to the Lions both times in the regular season, and they lost to the Rams earlier in the year, and they lost to them here. 11-0 against everybody else, 0-4 against the Lions and the Rams. And they benefited from having a good schedule, and they had a great year. No one expected them to have the year that they had. Congratulations, this team is good. This quarterback just got to get right. Because now, instead of feeling confident going into next year, even if they had lost, hey, if you put up a good performance, fine. The playoff inexperience versus the Rams playoff experience, you could say, okay, made the difference, and you can go on next year and figure it out. But now, that performance really makes you question what you're going to do. Because everyone was kind of like, oh, the Vikings should keep Sam Darnold. After that performance, do you really want to do that? Do you really want to spend the money, pay the big bucks to keep him around after that performance? Now, granted, it wasn't 100% his fault. But, I mean, the guy simply just was, again, he was seeing ghosts. He was seeing ghosts. He was holding on to the ball too long. He was missing wide open receivers. He was terrible in this game. Right? And, for other teams, you're kind of raising an eyebrow now, because if you're looking for a veteran quarterback in the free agency market, now you're going to get him for cheaper. But for the Vikings, now what do you do? Because in my opinion, going before this game, it was my opinion was you got to re-sign Sam Darnold and keep him here, right? So you continue to play well and let JJ McCarthy continue to, recover and, more importantly, develop and really, let him learn the ropes. And now the Vikings may not be doing that because of this performance, and it's unfortunate. But the quarterback position, they're going to have to figure it out and get it right. Whatever they do, it's what they're going to do. But this loss was just horrible. Absolutely, utterly horrible. And out of all the losses, this is the one I did not expect to happen. What a disappointing way for the Vikings to end their season. But that'll be the end of this video. If you guys made it to the end, thank you guys very, very, very much for watching. I appreciate it. Make sure that you guys like and subscribe to the channel. Hitting these 2 buttons really will help the algorithm, and will help this channel grow a ton, so I can continue to share my football passion with a bunch of more people on the internet. Along with that, letting me know your thoughts in the comment section down below, whether you're a fan of a team that won or a team that lost. I want to hear your guys' thoughts on what happened and how you guys are feeling now that's a few days removed of the Wildcard Round. And also, make sure you guys share the video, guys, whether you're sharing on social media or you guys are spreading word of mouth. Getting everybody locked in and locked on to the Shumake Take podcast would be awesome. Coming out with great content for you guys every Tuesday, every Wednesday at 8 a.m., although I'm trying my best to do that. It's really not working right now, but we're going to keep on trying to get the schedule consistent and clean. But that is going to do it for me today, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed. I will see you all next time.